Now our top story today, in the latest turn of events in the Israel-Iran conflict, Iranian missiles lit up the sky over Tel Aviv and the central city of Modi'in, marking a sharp escalation in the confrontation between the two regional rivals. European diplomats wrapped up talks with Iran's top negotiator amid cautious optimism for future dialogue, though no major breakthrough was achieved. Just hours after the nuclear talks in Geneva concluded, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi declared that Tehran is now re-evaluating its willingness to continue negotiations with Washington. Let's take a listen in.
Iran is ready to consider diplomacy once again, and once aggression is stopped and the aggressor is held accountable for the crimes committed. In this regard, I made it crystal clear that Iran's defense capabilities are not negotiable. We support continuation of discussion with E3 and EU and express our readiness to meet again.
Russian President Vladimir Putin also addressed the growing tensions during a speech at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, sharing Moscow's position on the crisis. Let's take a listen in.
Участием мы ни в коем случае, я хочу даже обратить на это внимание, мы не стремимся к посредничеству, мы просто предлагаем идеи, и если они будут оказаться привлекательными для обеих сторон, мы будем этому только.
In Venezuela, pro-government supporters marched through the streets of Caracas, condemning Israel's strikes on Iran and expressing solidarity with the Palestinian people. US President Donald Trump said his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was wrong when she claimed the US believed Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. He warned it would be very hard to stop Israel's strikes on Iran to negotiate a possible ceasefire. Trump also commented on European efforts to mediate between the two sides. Here's what he had to say.
Help at all in talking with Iran?
No, they didn't help. No. Iran doesn't want to speak to Europe. They want to speak to us. Europe is not going to be able to help in this.
To the US Geological Survey, the quake hit just as Israeli airstrikes continued to batter targets inside of the country. It was recorded near the city of Semnan at a depth of 10 kilometers. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed the Security Council. Let's take a listen to his comments.
The world is watching with growing alarm. We are not drifting toward crisis. We are racing toward it. We are not witnessing isolated incidents. We are on course to potential chaos. The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let them.
In Haifa, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar visited a missile strike site and accused Iran of intentionally targeting civilian areas. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot also warned that Iran's nuclear program has become far more aggressive and now poses a threat to Israel, the region, and to Europe. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul added that the United States must play a central role in finding a diplomatic solution. In a devastating strike, an Iranian missile hit a building at the Weizmann Institute of Science in central Israel, destroying key cancer research facilities and clinical trial materials. Now in Baghdad, thousands of supporters of influential cleric Muqtada Sadr rallied against Israel's military actions, chanting "No, no" to Israel. Analysts say Iraq continues to balance its alliance with Iran and its strategic relationship with the United States. In the wake of the latest strikes, Israeli emergency crews are searching through the rubble in Haifa. Local hospitals report at least 19 people have been injured. In Yemen's capital Sana'a, supporters of the Iran-backed Houthi rebels held large protests against Israel's attacks and declared support for Gaza. Israel's army chief, Eyal Zamir, also spoke out on the ongoing campaign. Let's take a listen to him.
מהמורכבות בתולדותינו. יצאנו למערכה על מנת להסיר איום שבסדר גודל כזה, מול אויב כזה, נדרשת מוכנות למערכה מתמשכת.
We're now joined by Spencer Critchley, who is a communications strategist. He joins us from California, USA. Spencer, thank you very much for joining us. Before we head into the more details of the developments of this ongoing crisis, it's entering its 8th day now. I want to get your, 9th day, sorry. I want to get your reaction to this relatively fresh conflict and the ongoing events that are currently surrounding it.
Well, it does not look good. I think this is an extremely tenuous and risky period in history, and of course it has echoes of the lead up to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, where you have people in this country and in other capitals across the Western world advocating for a very aggressive response to Iran, especially here in the U.S., unfortunately. And while it's understandable, I mean, given Iran's record of supporting and exporting terrorism and all of the other terrible things it's done over the years, and including its stated intention of wiping out Israel and the United States and the West if it has the opportunity to do so, I don't see signs that there's a clear plan on the part of the Trump administration in particular for what would happen after military action. And that's exactly the same problem that existed with the invasion of Iraq. So as the hostilities escalate between Israel and Iran, and Mr. Trump is making these vague threats about the United States getting involved, I think it just makes the situation that much more unstable, that much riskier. And I certainly hope the world isn't about to be plunged into a repeat of what we saw with the invasion of Iraq.
Spencer, I want to now move on to President Donald Trump and how he is dealing with these ongoing tensions and conflict. Tulsi Gabbard said on March the 25th of this year that Iran is not making nuclear weapons. He has completely dismissed her. What are your thoughts on him dismissing his own security advisor like he has done?
Well, this is an extra dimension of risk here, because here we have a dispute between two people who are entirely lacking in credibility. I mean, President Trump is notoriously uninterested in his intelligence briefings. He essentially refuses to take them. There's this presidential daily brief every morning, which previous presidents have paid very careful attention to for very good reasons. And Mr. Trump can't focus long enough to do it. And there's been discussion recently about maybe the intelligence briefers should produce a Fox News style TV program for him every morning, and maybe that would hold his attention. In his first administration, they resorted to keeping the briefing to one page with pictures in order to get him to sit through it. So there's Mr. Trump on the one hand, and then there's Tulsi Gabbard, and it's been hard for a long time to tell whether her loyalties lie with the United States or with Russia or with Syria. And she also just seems to be kind of nutty. Now, in this case, her statement seems to be accurate, that the consensus of the U.S. intelligence community is that Iran is not at this moment trying to take those final steps to develop nuclear weapons. But that doesn't matter to President Trump, because he apparently gets most of his ideas from watching Fox News and from consuming social media and from whomever was the last person to bend his ear.
Yes, and Spencer, I also want to delve into his statements about talking about the Europe negotiations and saying there's no point there, and saying that Iran does not want to negotiate with Europe when it comes to this, and that they want to negotiate with the United States. Now, this comes just as Iran says that they're contemplating possibly completely ending these negotiations, these nuclear negotiations with the United States amidst this conflict. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, and speaking of people with no credibility, then we have the government of Iran. You know, these mullahs with their incredibly repressive regime And with their terribly aggressive attitude to the rest of the region and the rest of the, at least the Western world, and their willingness to lie their heads off in pursuit of their twisted understanding of religious destiny, combined with their evident military weakness. I don't think that they were as strong as advertised beforehand, and now Israel, over the past year or two, has greatly weakened them further. I don't think they have much of a negotiating position, except, unfortunately, the prospect of what would happen if their regime were to completely fall apart and Iran were to devolve into potentially Libya-style chaos with loose radioactive material in play, as well as their remaining weapons.
Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for joining us. You are staying with us. For our next story, we stay in the Middle East, where the European Union Diplomatic Service has indicated that Israel may have breached its human rights obligations under the EU-Israel Association Agreement, a pact that governs bilateral ties between the two sides. Citing findings from independent international institutions, the European External Action Service said that there are signs that Israel is in violation of Article 2 of the agreement, which states that relations must be based on respect for human rights and democratic principles. The report comes amid growing concerns across European capitals over Israel's military campaign in Gaza and the escalating humanitarian crisis in the enclave. The document also notes that Israel's ongoing restrictions on aid, including food, medicine and medical equipment, are impacting the entire population of Gaza. The examination began after EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas announced in May that the bloc would review Israel's compliance with the agreement. The decision followed strong support from more than half of EU member states for a formal investigation. Responding to the report, an Israeli official has dismissed it as one-sided and accused the European Union of applying double standards. Now we move to Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the country is developing